If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. This is a widely popular statement that has grown more relatable with the rise of big tech firms that offer us free of cost services in exchange for our private data, thus making us the puppets of surveillance capitalism. About 2 decades ago, when today's so-called big tech fraternity was still in its infancy, the goal was to make the world a better place. And while most of us were carried away by this utopian mission, very few stayed back to question how this would be possible. And now, years later, when big tech firms have become the kingpin, we've realized that we were the lab rats of their experiment. However, big tech surveillance doesn't raise eyebrows anymore. It's almost a norm today. But what brings it to the forefront is yet another case, this time against Google. Google has agreed to destroy billions of data records that it stored for years. This is to settle a lawsuit. The class action lawsuit was filed in 2020. It alleged that Google secretly tracked the internet usage of its users, even for users who were using a private browsing mode, popularly known as Google's Incognito mode. The lawsuit covers millions of people who used Google's Incognito mode since June 1st, 2016.
So Google recently announced a major settlement where they agreed to delete billions of records on customers that were collected when they were using the Google Chrome incognito mode. Now, for years, people thought that incognito mode was a way to keep them, well, just that, incognito, to keep their browsing private. But in fact, incognito mode did very little to prevent your browsing from being tracked by companies like Google.
Users allege Google misled them into believing that it wouldn't track their internet activities while using Incognito. However, it argued, Google's advertising technologies and other techniques continue to track them. This, the plaintiff said, turned Google into a quote-unquote unaccountable trove of information. Google's tracking practices enabled it to learn about users' interests, contacts, shopping habits, health conditions, and the most intimate and potentially embarrassing things. But what is Google's incognito mode? And how did Google get away with this practice for years?
I think, this is entirely a problem of Google's own creation. They never had to have a private browsing mode. They never had to promise anyone they were going to keep their data safe. But they did it anyway. They wanted people to have that sense of security. And so when they didn't deliver, they were on the hook to make that right. And now, because of this lawsuit, they're going to have to.
Incognito is a rather curiosity-generating word. The word immediately conjures up an identity in our head of a person in a trench coat and hat mimicking the antics of Sherlock Holmes. And although Google uses a similar-looking spy guy icon, it's only a testament to Google's brilliant use of imagery and semantics. Incognito essentially means concealing one's identity. And while the incognito mode does offer the feature, it doesn't entirely stand up to its name. When you turn on Google's incognito mode, think of it as a fresh start. You won't be automatically logged in to your accounts. No suggestions will appear on the search bar based on your history. Your browsing history will not be saved. Your browser won't remember where you've been or store any information you filled into any forms. And as soon as you close the incognito window, your browser forgets that the session ever took place. This sort of anonymity is what incognito mode is good at. But if you're looking for an untraceable experience, you're probably at the wrong place. As soon as you log into any of your favorite sites, say Gmail, Facebook, or Amazon, your actions are no longer anonymous. Incognito modes generally do not prevent the websites you visit from seeing your location. Neither does it stop your internet service provider from logging your activities as long as your IP address is visible. Your identity and activity remains fully exposed to search engines and third parties. For instance, if you signed into Facebook in incognito mode, there's nothing that'll stop Facebook from tracking your activity. In fact, it will also be able to see what you're up to on other sites. The websites will then strategically use your search data to target ads at you. This can be managed to some extent by blocking third-party cookies. Cookies are small pockets of data that browsers use to save your information. However, ad platforms and tracking technologies have a far-reaching network, and this makes it very difficult to stop tracking entirely.
Having this sort of, protection for, incognito mode, is long overdue, but it's not enough to really give people full, ease of mind when they're using the internet. There are still so many ways that every keystroke we type, every URL we visit can be tracked and used against us in a court of law. And I'm terrified about the ways that that can undermine not just anonymity, not just autonomy, but democracy itself.
Under Google's new settlement, it's not only agreed to delete the treasure trove of user data, but has also pledged to make more changes. The firm said it will update its disclosures to let users know about the data it collects in incognito browsing mode. Google has added that it will let users block third-party cookies for 5 years. A lawyer for the plaintiffs touted this as a historic step. He said this will require big tech firms to be more honest and accountable, but it's only natural to be cynical about Google's pledges. The promises may sound like new beginnings for Google, but in reality, it seems like a long shot. That's because telling the truth about its data collection practices isn't really in Google's best interest. Google's business thrives on user data. It requires a constant supply of information to feed its advertising enterprise. The relatable ads that you see on Instagram while randomly scrolling is not because your device is mysteriously eavesdropping, but it's rather fueled by a huge pile of metadata and such user information collected by websites through Google and other tech firms. This further helps these firms earn handsome profits, and less data means less profit. So why would a trillion-dollar corporation willingly set fire to its main source of revenue? The dark reality is Google may continue its age-old practices and just not tell us until another lawsuit arises. But until then, we, the ardent users addicted to Google, can only rely on the company's words and wonder, can you really trust a big tech promise?